of brought my mind back into my body so that they can kind of work together. So now my mind can say, oh, well, watch out because we got this coming up ahead. And then my heart can say, well, let's look at it and let's find out, okay, is there any truth in those fears? Like, for example, if you touch a hot stove, then you're going to think twice every time that you're around a stove. But before you're going to make a decision on if you touch it or not, you're going to look to see, are the knobs on or are they off? Is it glowing red or is it just cold and black? And then using the mind to get to those answers, I can make a more honest evaluation of the situation. So instead of, oh my gosh, there's a stove, don't touch it, then my heart can speak up and say, well, what do we know to be true about a stove? We know that this is hot whenever the dial's on, and we know that it's hot whenever it's glowing red. Are either of these two things true? No? Okay, well then let's proceed with caution. Let's go ahead and just kind of lean into it. Get your hand close to it. Do you feel heat coming off of it? No? Touch it real quick. Touch it real quick. Okay, it's cold. But if you just went with no, all stoves are hot, because our mind really likes to generalize, by the way. If it sees it true once, it's going to assume that it's true all the time. If it sees that it's true twice, it's going to assume that it's definitely all the time. If it sees that it's not true once but true twice, it's still going to think it happens all the time, because it'd rather keep you alive than keep you thriving. So when you can stop yourself in the process, instead of, oh my gosh, there's a stove, don't touch it, to, okay, let's get to what we know to be true about this stove, and then make a more informed, balanced decision, then you can really keep moving forward in your life. That stove analogy and apply it into my life, I would take, for example, communication with a spouse a lot of times can be an issue. Like, I can't believe you just talked to me that way. I can't believe that you just said that to me. And we can take things really, really personal because we care a lot. And that's a perfect example of somewhere being really attached. We get attached to a person, we get attached to the situation, and we just don't want it to ever be different. So we start making crazy choices within that situation to ensure that it's not going to be different. So my husband would say to me, I know a certain example where I was like cutting pizza, and he walks up behind me and he looks at me and he says, what are you cutting it that way for? My mind said, I cannot believe that he does not even trust me to cut a pizza. He cannot think that or never thinks that I do anything right. He always thinks that his way is better. Who the heck does he think he is? Over here questioning me on how I cut a pizza. I'm 32 years old. I know how to cut a pizza. You know, my mind starts. I don't even know. You know, my mind's like, what kind of question is that?
It's like, how do you cut a pizza wrong?
Exactly. Like, why is he even asking me? Exactly. Why is he even asking me this? What's wrong with him? It's all going to taste the same. No matter how, you know, my mind went on this spill, and I'm sure you guys can relate to an instance in which somebody questioned you that you were just like, what? How dare he even question my pizza cutting abilities? And I stopped myself. This was the first instance that I was conscious in what was happening. Normally, if I was not aware of what was going on in the situation, I would have just been like, if you think you can cut the pizza better, why don't you just cut it yourself? Now, all he did was ask me, why are you cutting it that way? My instinct, my reactive mode was to be like, well, fine, why don't you do it? If Mr. Smart Pizza Cutting Master, you know, that was my first reaction. And instead I stopped because I had that little moment. I breathed, which is really, really key. And we're going to do probably a whole class on breathing in the future, because I've gotten to this new level of understanding my breath that's been just really, really powerful. And I never understood it that way in the past. So if I can relate my perspective, I definitely want to do that. I took a moment's breath, and I thought to myself, okay, this is perfect, because I feel this anxiety and stuff building up in me. I could feel like this feeling. So instead of acting it, I took a moment, and I was like, okay, what do I know to be true? Where's the truth? The truth of the situation. Because I don't know what he meant. I don't know what was behind that question. All I heard were the words that came out of his mouth. Why he said it, what he was thinking, what was beyond it, I don't know that. I have no way of knowing, unless I ask him. Crazy idea that would be, to ask somebody what they're thinking instead of just assuming. But I realized I didn't know what was motivating him. So what do I know to be true? What I do know to be true is that my husband loves me. He loves me, and he thinks that I am amazing. So if I know that to be a truth, that my husband loves me, he thinks that I'm amazing, why would he think that I don't know how to cut a pizza? He wouldn't think that I don't know how to cut a pizza. He would think that I'm the best pizza cutter ever. So maybe he's just asking me why I'm cutting it that way. You know what I mean? Maybe
he just wants to understand.
He just wants to know. So, I'm sitting there, I'm cutting the pizza, and I've gone from like this, to, wait a minute. So I stopped, and I responded back. I looked at him, I said, because this is the way I want to cut it. And he looked at me and goes, cool. And he walked off. I could have had a huge fight. I could have had this whole, well, if you think that you can cut it better, then he's going to be like, what the heck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? It could have started this whole cycle. And then it made me think, how many times have I done that in the past that we've ended up in some fight because I assumed that he was attacking me when in truth he's not attacking me, because in truth he loves me and he would never attack me. So I was able to stop in that moment, choose a totally different response, and it was peaceful. And it was quiet, and like the birds were chirping. So of course, I stopped after that moment. I was like, wow, he doesn't even know what just happened. He doesn't even know that all that just took place in my head. So I'm going to tell him, so maybe we can both start implementing this cool little tool. Not thinking about how it took me years of building up to that level of awareness that I could even use that little tool. I had really learned it like 5 years beforehand, but just now got to a point where I could implement it. So I explained it to him, of course. His response was, well, great, you just do that every time and we'll no longer have fights.
You're like,
which to me, of course, my initial reaction is, well, why do I have to be the only one to, you know what I mean? That's my initial thing.
It's like, well, I shared this thing, you can do too.
But what do I know to be true about that? What I know to be true about that is that he's absolutely right. If I can have the awareness in every single situation to choose, do I go with this anxiety-filled, horrible, pull out the lightsaber and take down the dragon, whatever. Do I go down that path? Or am I going to, what I call, err on the side of love? And if I'm going to doubt something really, really positive and good, and choose a different response. And voila, it worked. It doesn't mean that the very next instant, and the very next incident, and the very next incident, I was just bam, bam, bam on top of it. But I had seen it work once. And what my mind is looking for is proof. My mind wants to know facts, figures, statistics, analyze reports, pie graphs, whatever it can get to prove that something is real, because that's what's going to build my belief system. But it takes that awareness of the situation. If I was not aware of the physical response that was coming up in my body, I would have had nothing except for just that reactive mode that I've been operating from for years. And again, it took me catching it after the fact. It took me having a fight, fuming about it hours later, sitting there thinking and replaying it over and over and over and over and over again in my mind, and then finally retrieving that bit of personal empowerment, self-help from whatever book that I got some little nugget from to implement, oh, that's where I went wrong, or that's what I could have done differently. It took, who knows? I mean, honestly, I have absolutely no idea, because how many times has that happened that I'm not conscious? No idea. But it took that consistency to be around that information and to get that into my heart and to get it into my head and to really own it before I could really implement it. But once I got that evidence, it makes me really excited. Now I want to do it more and more and more, and because I want more and more and more of that peace and that feeling. So as easy as it is for me to be like, gosh, my husband can be cranky and questionable and this or that, I have control over how I respond to it. And I have control over what I present first. And I have a control over, even though I can't control his emotions, I can control mine. And if he chooses suffering, it doesn't mean that I have to choose suffering. And that's the kind of world I want to create. I want to create a situation that it doesn't matter if the whole world is crumbling down around me in the worst, horrific, apocalyptic perspective or vision that I could ever create in my mind. If everything is falling down around me, I still want the ability to be blissfully happy and to choose to be blissfully happy. And I feel that we have that potential. And I want to do whatever I can to get into it. And it always, always, always starts with awareness. That you really hit on a key point, because it's the paths that we take to avoid a situation that usually leads us straight to it. And I know that this is something that I've really, really taken to heart recently in my relationship and in my life is understanding that just because I think that my perspective is right or it's right for me or what I believe it to be true, if somebody else has a different perspective on the situation, that's their truth. It doesn't matter if I know more information or if I've had different experiences. That's still their truth. It doesn't matter if it's my truth or not. It's their truth. So we got two people coming together who are both so determined to be right and have things their way because they both want the same outcome, but they think it should be handled in two different ways. If neither one of those people budge down, you're going to get exactly what you don't want. The exact opposite of what you're being so hills in the ground for. You're going to get the total opposite. And all it takes is one person in that situation to have the awareness to make a different choice to stop the cycle. And that's what I love about this, is that this is the most empowered I've ever been, because it does not matter what decision anybody else makes around me. It's only going to affect me negatively if I choose to look at it negatively. And I heard that for years, that I choose my own emotions, but I didn't quite understand. Like, well, I know that I could choose to be happy right now, but right now I am ticked off. Right now I'm angry, and I know that I could choose to be happy, but I don't want to choose to be happy right now because I'm mad. And going through that and not really understanding, how could I not choose? And quite frankly, it's because I had been doing that for longer periods of time that I believe that to be more true than the fact that I could change my emotion. Like, I believed here that I could change my emotion, like I understood the concept of it, but I didn't necessarily believe, and I wasn't even aware that I didn't believe, that I could actually do that. And that's why it wasn't happening. And it would take me like hours to get over stuff, days to get over stuff, hours to get over stuff. Now, quite literally, it's very, very rare, and I could only think of maybe like one or two occasions in the past 6 months that I've had something happen that stays with me longer than just a couple of hours. And yeah, maybe a couple of days, and it would be a couple of days of randomly thinking about it, not like focused thinking about it. But the majority of my situations that I deal with now, especially in my day-to-day life, and the more that I practice this, the easier it gets, and therefore the less conflict I'm creating in my life to even have to face. Because once you start to get a lesson, it stops presenting itself. It's a pretty cool thing that happens once you can get to that other side of it. And then there's just a whole new lesson that's waiting for you. So, yeah, but at least it's not the same lesson. Right. At least it's not the same one. But if you're getting the same thing in life, you're missing the lesson. And it might take on different forms, different faces, different places, different circumstances, different events. But if it's at the core the same exact thing over and over and over and over and over again, perfect indication that it's something that you're missing within you. Because I've heard people say, well, that's the way it always goes. That's the way it happens in every relationship that I have. And it's going to keep on happening in every relationship that you have, no matter who the person is, until you stop saying, see, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. No, every single time you point that finger out at somebody else, you absolutely are just pointing out that you have that same thing within you. But we're just kind of conditioned, or it's our nature or our culture just to, well, bring in a new one. Bring in a new one. That one was no good. Bring in a new one. To me, again, that's like, as long as I'm controlled by something that's outside of myself, then, it's just like sitting here waiting to be told what my life's going to be like. And I don't want to do that. I want to tell you what my life's going to be like. And then that way I can create it and make it happen. That's a lot more fun to me.